Hi, I'm Victor Perton, and this is the Centre for Optimism. And today I am delighted to welcome my friend, John Hagel. I don't want to embarrass him, but he has been my guru for the last decade. His book, The Power of Pull, I think I've counted up quoting it at least 100 times in my life. And he's been hugely influential. He's joined the advisory board of the Centre for Optimism, and he's been a huge support in terms of how we try and organise ourselves. All of the good organisation is thanks to his advice, all the bad organisation is thanks to my failings. And he's got his new brilliant book, which couldn't be better timed for the world than The Journey Beyond Fear. John Hagel, welcome.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
John, first question we always ask our guests at the Centre for Optimism: what makes you optimistic?
Wow. Well, many things. I think part of my optimism stems on taking what I call the long view. I look at history over centuries, if not millennia. And if you look at virtually any dimension of progress, the progress has been enormous over the millennia. Yes, we have fluctuations along the way, but the progress is pretty amazing. And so that makes me optimistic. And then the other thing is just that I believe we are entering a period of what I call exponentially expanding opportunity. We can create much more value with far less resource, far more quickly than would have been imaginable a decade or two ago. So that makes me optimistic as well, exponentially expanding opportunity.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. History and the future, I think. And it sums up in your book, The Journey Beyond Fear. You talk about your childhood, how when things were going wrong, you retreated towards science fiction. And science fiction in those days was so optimistic rather than dystopian. Do you want to share a little bit about that from the book?
No. Well, again, in the book, it's partly a memoir. I talk about my childhood. I had a very dysfunctional family, a lot of fear. And one of my ways of dealing with it was retreating into my bedroom and reading a science fiction novel, because it inspired me to say there's opportunity in the future. As bad as things may be at the moment, for me, we're facing an incredibly awesome future. And so it kept me going, not losing hope, for sure.
What I've been listening to in your book launch and reading the book and in my conversations with you, you've talked about picking up this fear in business leaders, fear in government leaders, fear in organizational leaders. And I think that's really the genesis of the book, those conversations. So do you want to tell us what is the journey beyond fear, John? And are the leaders and the people you know caught up with fear? And is this an antidote to that fear?
Yeah, well, it's I'd say that the two catalysts for writing this book, one was that my career has been in business strategy. I was taught to believe strategy is everything. And over the years, I've come to realize that it's less about strategy and more about psychology. That if we don't understand the emotions that are shaping our choices and actions, the best strategy is just going to sit on a shelf somewhere. So that was the first catalyst. The second catalyst was I traveled around the world as part of my work. And this was 3 years ago when I started writing the book. So not in the past year, but 3 years ago. Everywhere I traveled, the dominant emotion I was encountering was fear. At the highest levels of organizations, at the front lines of organizations, out in the community, fear was the dominant emotion. And while I think it's understandable, in the book I say this is not completely irrational, at the same time it's a very limiting emotion. And so the focus of my book is, okay, first of all, let's acknowledge our fear, because many of us don't even want to acknowledge it. But then let's find ways to move beyond it. And in my book, I talk about 3 pillars that, and again, my book is partly memoir, so it's partly drawing on my personal journey beyond fear, and then partly based on research that I've done for several decades now on various aspects of what I address in the book. But I focus on three pillars that I believe can help in the journey beyond fear. One is, the first pillar is what I call narrative. But as you'll see, I tend to have very different definitions of things than most people do. So for most people, narratives are the same thing as stories. They're the same. For me, there's a big distinction. Stories are self-contained. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end to it, the end. And stories are about the storyteller, or they're about some other people, real or imagined, but they're not about you. You can use your imagination, figure out what you would have done in that story, but let's be clear, it's not about you. And for me, a narrative, in contrast, is open-ended. There is no resolution yet. There is some kind of big threat or opportunity out in the future, not clear whether it's going to be addressed or not. And the resolution of the narrative hinges on you. It's a call to action to say your choices, your actions are going to help determine how this narrative resolves. So I think that can be a powerful catalyst in the journey beyond fear. We can go into more detail on that. But second pillar is, again, a term that everyone uses, passion. I have a very specific form of passion that I focus on. I call it the passion of the explorer. And again, it's based on research that I've done. Essentially, people who have this passion have a long-term commitment to a domain and having increasing impact in that domain. That's what excites them and motivates them. Second is they have a questing disposition. They get excited by new challenges. In fact, if they're not challenged, they seek them out because they realize that's the way to get more and more impact in that domain. And then finally, the third element of the passion of the explorer is they have a connecting disposition. Their first reaction when confronting a new challenge is, how can I connect with others? Who can I connect with who can help me get to a better answer faster? So that's the passion of the explorer, and I think it can be a fuel to fuel us in that journey beyond fear. And then finally, a third pillar is what I call learning platforms, very specific form of platform. And it has to do with learning, not in the form of just listening to lectures and courses online. It's learning in the form of creating new knowledge by acting together through a platform helping you to do that. And so I think these pillars are very powerful. They're not fully appreciated. They're not going to eliminate fear. I don't believe they will eliminate fear. I believe we will still have fear, but we'll be able to move beyond fear. We'll have the motivation to act and have the impact that's meaningful to us. And ultimately, it will enable us to address that exponentially expanding opportunity. So I think it's very powerful. So let me stop there and just see if that.
I could listen to you for hours, but we've limited ourselves to an hour today. And those of you who are online, your questions will be there. There's a Q&A box. We prefer to take the questions through Q&A, and as long as you're dressed and decent, because we do have people all the way from the east coast of the US now and through to Africa. So a wonderful mix of people joining in. But I've got three panelists now who are each experts in each of the pillars, and I'd like to ask Robert Masters, the chair of the Centre for Optimism, to engage with John on the pillar of the narrative.
Thanks, Victor and John. I've ordered your book, but I haven't got it yet. But the narrative intrigues me from both a leadership point of view and a personal point of view. So you identified as both threats and opportunities. So how do you see, or how do you actually determine what are those threats and opportunities for a leader, and then also on a personal basis?
No, I think it's an important process of reflection. I first of all, in the book, I address narrative at multiple levels. I think there's the level of the individual, personal narrative. I think there's corporate narratives. I think there are geographical narratives, and then what I call movement narratives that help to drive movements. And I think it's in the personal narrative front, again, in psychology, there's a lot of psychologists talk about personal narrative. When you ask them what they mean by it, it means tell me your story. Where did you come from? How did you get to where you are today? The end, you're here now. That's your personal narrative. For me, the personal narrative is what's your view of the future? Is it driven by a sense of threat or a sense of opportunity? And if either one, what threat or what opportunity is really motivating your actions today and your emotions today? Is it driving fear or is it driving excitement? And then the other piece to the personal narrative, which I think also is very powerful, is the call to action to others. So what's your call to, are you asking for help in addressing that threat or opportunity? Or are you just trying to do it all by yourself and, hope for the best? And again, I think the really powerful personal narrative has a call for help, asking for help, whether it's an opportunity or a threat. My guidance is, first of all, articulate your personal narrative, because most of us have not, and then reflect on it, because I think many people begin to see, oh my God, I'm really being driven by a view of the future that is essentially threat. And then stepping back and saying, what could really excite me about the future? Or is there some opportunity out there that could really excite me? And start to see if you can move in that direction versus holding on to that threat and fear. So let me stop there and see if that.
And well, do you see the leader actually taking a role in that? Because personal fear is something, as you've highlighted, you can, hopefully seek to address yourself, but maybe you need support as well. But from a leadership perspective, how do you see them having a role?
No, I think a big role. Unfortunately, I'm going to generalize throughout this, so you'll have to forgive me. I know there are exceptions, but my general view, based again on my experience, is that most large institutions today around the world are driven by fear, and the leaders. I mean, one of the things that I really challenge is when leaders see a need for transformation, for change of the institution, they resort to what's known as the burning platform message. If we don't change, we're all going to die. We're going to collapse. So let's get with it. Let's move and change. And they're playing to fear, right? Oh my God, we're going to die. And in my experience, at least, that builds resistance among the people. If we're under attack, we want to hold on to what we have. We don't want to take any risk. Let's resist any effort to change. And to me, the real opportunity for leaders is to frame an inspiring opportunity for people to say, there is something out there that we could accomplish that would make what we've done in the past virtually irrelevant. It's so big and so massive in terms of impact. Let's move forward. This is exciting versus, we're all going to die.
We see that in optimism and corporate strategy as well as political strategy. They don't, as in leaders, do not seize what you've just highlighted. So it's a key thing from where we sit as well.
Now, again, I'll generalize, but I think it's true around most of the world and increasingly true around the world. So it's why I wrote the book. It was the motivation to write the book, for sure.
Well, I think narrative is an all-day conversation. I just love I love it, and so does Rob. But as I said to everyone who's online, we've got 3 experts in each of the pillars that John has given to us as the journey from fear. And Charles Kovess, 20 years ago, gave up being a commercial lawyer to be a passion provocateur. In his book, The Power of Passion, John is also a great influence on me. So Charles, would you like to engage with John on the question of passion?
Indeed. Congratulations on the book, John. I know how difficult it is, and happy getting a book done is like giving birth to a baby, except I'm 10 years into my fourth book. And, you only took 3 years, so I commend you on that. Now, in Australia, happy first day of winter to all us Australians.
Oh,
Or everyone
wow.
in the Southern Hemisphere, I suppose.
Yeah.
1st of June, although it's still Memorial Day for you, John, isn't it?
It is. It is.
So Victor, it's 28 years ago that I gave away a very successful legal career. In fact, it was the month of June in 1993, so 28 years. And I am a world's expert in passion. So I've written 2 books, Passionate People Produce and Passionate Performance, and then co-authored another 2 books. And my 5th book actually is coming out now. John, the journey. So I totally agree with you. Most large organizations and most people's thinking is dominated by fear. So this book is desperately needed. Now, my model, and I'm interested in your view on this. So I have a definition of passion, that it's a source of unlimited energy from your soul, your spirit, your heart, that enables you to produce extraordinary results. Extraordinary. Why extraordinary? Because most people are not passionate. So my research shows that less than 20% of people are passionate about their work. They might be passionate about something. Now, it's a source of energy, and I don't want to go into definitions because we are generalizing in a short time frame, but love, okay, the opposite of love, many people unthinkingly say hate, but in fact, the opposite of love is fear. And fear only comes from the mind, not from the heart, from the soul, from the spirit. And so our lives are a battle, how I see it, and I'm interested in your views on this because I certainly have the passion of the explorer, but passion comes from your spirit, fear comes from the mind. And what we have is this battle going on between mind and spirit. And it is my contention that politicians and large organizations want their people to be in fear because then we are controllable. And I am in trouble for unleashing passion. You are going to be in trouble for squashing fear. Politicians and organizations want control. What say you?
It's great to hear you on this topic. It's obviously a topic near and dear to my heart. I actually wrote a piece several years ago. I came away from a conference where everybody was talking about mindset and how we need to change people's mindset. And my piece in classic provocative nature was, what about heart set? And then what about spirit set? Because if we don't focus on the heart set and the spirit set, mindset is just going to dominate and not to the best of our needs and interests. So I totally resonate with your sense of it goes deeper into the heart and the spirit, and it is about love. I think it's also just about excitement. You talked about energy, unlimited energy. To me, it's that energy that really is so stimulating to people and keeps them moving in spite of the worst challenges out there. I just have to mention quickly, one of my areas of research was in extreme sports, things like big wave surfing and extreme skiing. And if you talk to a big wave surfer who's paddling out to ride that next big wave, they've got big fear. There's fear. They know that people have died riding those kinds of waves, not just fallen off their board. They've died, yet they're still paddling because they're so excited about the opportunity to do something that hasn't been done before and achieve more of their potential. And so that to me is a classic of the passion explorer. I'm not saying that we're going to eliminate fear. I think fear will be with us. There are things to be afraid of for sure. But on the other hand, what's going to motivate us to move beyond and give us that energy and excitement? And I have to also mention, you talked about your indication of how many people had passion in their work. I actually did a survey of the US workforce, the entire US workforce. And at best, 14% of the US workforce has passion about their work.
Thank you. So I will quote that. That'll be my latest number, Victor. You can quote it as well. 14% of the US workforce, and I'm satisfied that Australia will be no better. Now I know we've got to go to the next thing, but I want to add one piece to this, and that's this: that we are dynamic human beings. And I'm a fan of Buckminster Fuller. So here's the world's most accurate map of the world, the Dymaxion map of the world. We are either expanding or shrinking. And the model that I urge people to have is that when you come from, take the journey beyond fear, come from passion, you are expanding. When you let fear dominate your life, you are shrinking. And you can't be static. You're either expanding or shrinking. And those big wave surfers are certainly expanding. So there you are. Thank you, John.
Totally. Absolutely.
And what I love about both of you, John and Charles, is that when you speak to audiences big and small, you're not afraid to speak about love. You know, love as being a part of passion, love as being part of your lives. It's really, to me, extremely inspiring. And no, I love what both of you do. So to those of you watching online and on Facebook and those who'll be watching later, we've asked 3 experts on 3 of the most important pillars of John's journey from fear. And Jenny and Noirin, of course, created Project Optimism and The Habits of an Optimist, and they are both experts on these modern day platforms. And John, as you say, the most important of those are learning platforms. So can I throw to you, Jenny and Noirin?
Thanks, Victor. Wow, this conversation about passion is exciting. John, you know, a love of learning underpins everything we do, and you know, I know it's something that you're very passionate about as well. Can you talk a little bit more about this concept of learning platforms and how you see that working in organizations and out in the wider world? Because I think the way you describe it is so unique and it's so impactful.
Well, I view it as an untapped opportunity. Everybody talks about platforms these days, but they're typically talking about aggregation platforms, you know, where you do short-term transactions like buy and sell products, or they're social platforms where it's just about connecting with friends and family and sustaining relationships. The platform here is where the primary design focus is on how to help the participants to learn faster. And again, not in the form of listening to lectures, but learning through action and reflecting on the impact that's been achieved. And a key element, and it's a theme in the book, is that ultimately, no matter how smart you are as an individual or talented, you're going to learn so much faster as part of a small group. And I call them impact groups. And again, it's based on research. Typically, it's between 3 to 15 people, no larger than 15 people. And they form deep trust-based relationships with each other. And the interesting thing about them is, on the one side, they're supporting each other. They're helping each other when they get frustrated and lose energy. They're supporting, but at the same time, they're challenging each other. Why can't we get to an even higher level of impact? What do we need to do? And challenging. And so it's creating a platform where these small groups can come together and create shared workspaces where they can learn through action, and giving them feedback loops so they can see what kind of impact they've achieved in their action and reflect on that and build reputations based on the action and impact they've achieved. But then it's connecting those impact groups together on the platform into a broader network so they can learn from each other and ask questions and see if anybody else has any ideas on how to address this new challenge that they're facing. And so I think it's badly needed. I think, again, there are elements that you can point to in certain platforms that start to give an indication of the potential. But in my experience, there's just no large-scale platform today that has that as the primary design objective.
Thank you. That's Awesome. It's brilliant. It's, I mean, it's so powerful. You know, it's amazing what we can achieve by coming together and learning from others' mistakes and successes. And yeah, so thank you.
And part of it too, again, just to bring it back to fear, is that if you can scale your impact, the more you can scale your impact, the more excited you can get, and the less you'll be constrained by the fear. You're seeing more and more impact. This is amazing. How can I get involved even more? And so it reinforces that sense of excitement and desire to move forward.
Just before, because Noirin has a brilliant question, which we were talking about with Moscow the other day, John, but Miriam, who's in the United States, just wants a little bit more detail on why the 3 to 15? Why is the 15 the max?
You know, it's again based on just the research of once you go above 15 people, you tend the relationships are not as deep and trust-based if you try to scale. And so it's that emphasis again on deep personal relationships. And by the way, when I talk about impact groups, they take many different forms. It's again, it keeps coming up in my research, everything again from extreme sports people to religious movements to you know, it's everywhere. But I think it's that sense of deep connection. These impact groups are meeting at least once or twice a week. And again, their focus is not on, they're not a discussion group or a book reading club. They're focused on what action can we take relative to the opportunity that it brought us together and that excites us. And how can we have even more impact from that action? It's all about impact, not just acting for the sake of action, but to get the impact and really learn from it. It's that learning mindset that really is critical to them.
Noirin?
Yeah, great. Thank you. Sorry, I just keep hearing the word excitement, John, and that's the core of my question. Yeah, I think there's so much that we can be looking forward to develop within the platform space, and I think that actual sweet spot of size groups for impact, I think is a lesson for us all to learn. Actually, I think you're right. Actually, from my experience, I think you're bang on the money with that particular point. My question about excitement is excitement and optimism. So, as Victor referenced, we had a very interesting webinar event last week with University College Dublin, and a very good friend of mine, Barry Sheridan, is working at a very high level in Moscow, right? And he's a bit of a, you know, like Charles, he's probably not like yourself. He's a bit of a passionate kind of push the boundary, you know, check what kind of works, kind of level up excitement and I guess passion in people that he works with. But he said that one of his questions, assuming all the other tick boxes are done for his new staff are done, he says to them, what makes you excited? In fact, he actually says to them, what turns you on? Which is a bit like dodgy, but he's in Russia and he says he just tries it out. But really what he's asking is, you know, what makes you excited? And I'm just wondering about what you think the relationship is between excitement, optimism, and passion, please.
Wow. They're all deeply connected. I think that ultimately the only way to get really excited is by having some kind of sense of amazing opportunity that is achievable. You're optimistic that it can be achieved, and that excites you that it can be achieved. There's also, I think, a sense that it's not going to happen by itself, so we need to act. If we don't act, we're never going to get to that full opportunity that's out there. So there's real optimism, there's real sense of need for action. And you know, I think the people who have passion of the explorer, and again, it's a very specific form of passion. I won't talk about, well, I'll just briefly mention, I have a whole taxonomy of passion in my book, but one element of one form of passion is what I call the passion of the true believer. And those people can describe in extraordinary detail the opportunity or the direction and destination that we're going in. They have the roadmap fully. and they can describe every step that we need to take along the way. And the only question is, are you with me or are you not going to join? And again, the passionate explorer, they have a sense of the opportunity ahead, but they haven't mapped it out in great detail. They know there's so much to be learned about it and need to learn. And then they have a sense of the first couple of steps that we're going to need to take to move towards that opportunity. But they couldn't possibly describe every step along the way that needs to be taken, because we're going to learn as we go. And so I think that's what gets people excited, is that we can really make this happen, and we need to learn together. Let's come together to achieve this. So
all three ingredients, super important together. Yeah, I love it, John. Thank you.
Deeply connected. Absolutely.
Thank you.
If I can call up Mark Matthews. Mark is an extraordinary man. He was in the military. He then became an entrepreneur in Fiji, helping people grow a vegetable market. He was then in economic development in North Queensland. He now works for an organisation that supports the widows and widowers and children of deceased servicemen and women. And he's always a great narrative man. He always spins both a good story and a good narrative. So Mark, you were going to ask John for some perspectives.
Thanks very much, Victor, and thanks to everyone. This is such an inspirational discussion, but in such a practical way, and I think it can be so useful for everybody who's connected to the conversation today. John, these aspirational narratives are powerful, but they also bring out criticism and negativity from others, which perhaps brings us to question our ability to achieve those goals that we've set, to achieve that narrative that we've placed in front of us. It's perhaps easy to say, I'll just ignore it. However, our lizard brains continue to torment us about that negativity which resides in us. What are some of the ways that we can build resilience and turn this negativity to leverage our strengths? And I have a second part to the question, is how much does culture play a part in success? Thanks.
So I guess the question of how do you build resilience in the face of skepticism and opposition, if you will. I think first element in my mind is find ways to connect with others who share your passion and excitement about the opportunity. Because again, it comes back to this notion of impact groups. If I've got a small group of people who share my conviction that this is really an exciting thing worth pursuing, I'm going to be more able to resist the skeptics or the people who are trying to pull me down. And I think another piece is focusing on the subtitle of my previous book, The Power of Pull, was small moves smartly made can set big things in motion. So it's not just about identifying a really inspiring big opportunity out in the future. It's focusing on what moves could we make today that would accelerate our movement towards that longer term opportunity, and what impact can we achieve? Because the more quickly you can start to show some impact, the more quickly you can overcome some of that skepticism and resistance that you're encountering. Because now people say, oh my God, you were able to do that? Whoa, maybe I should be joining you rather than criticizing you. And so I think that and then cultivating the excitement about the increasing impact, really talking about what impact was achieved and is it accelerating? Are we increasing our impact over time? In my experience, again, can help overcome the skeptics. And I think part of it too is just recognizing that a lot of the skepticism and resistance is ultimately coming from fear. Those people are afraid that you're not going to succeed. They're not going to succeed if they join you. It's too risky. So the more you can start to show real progress and impact and maintain, again, that long-term view of what the really big opportunity is that hasn't yet been achieved, now you start to overcome the fear and bring more people on board. So let me stop there.
Yes. It's that momentum that builds that confidence, that success. That infectious optimism, that enthusiasm, that passion, that heart, and that momentum of that, which I can see creates that ripple effect. Thanks.
And you exemplify that, Mark, that realistic and infectious optimism that instills confidence. Now, Matt Lannigan, John, I call him the king of Chapel Street, which is the one part of the entertainment district of Melbourne. But of course, much of it is shut down now and in some trouble. But he's got a new startup and he's got a great question. Given you are the guru of Silicon Valley and you've seen so many thousands of startups in those 40 years, Matt, you wanted to ask a question about fear in startups.
Yeah, sure. First of all, thanks, Victor, for everything that you do with the Centre of Optimism. It's amazing. I love it. And you should be credited for that. And yeah, thanks, John. Yeah, look, we have a startup and I am very passionate about it. It's focusing on making housing more affordable in Australia and bringing down the entry level of where it currently sits is about $500,000 for a house and land package, and we're trying to bring that down. So we've got a long task ahead of us, but we're slowly making some small steps and getting some good traction. However, inside the business, the levels of fear between me and my business partner, and then also the other people inside the business are all at a different level at different times. And it's a very high risk, high reward kind of business for everyone involved because everyone's invested in one part or another. And so some people thrive from that fear and that, I guess, the anxiousness, and then others find it really hard to perform at their optimal level, which makes a really, for me, a really unique energy in the workspace to be able to manage all the different pillars and tasks and roles and responsibilities that need to be achieved. So yeah, I thought maybe being the guru, you may have some tricks or some ways in which I could pick your brain about.
No, I think you've made an important first step, which is simply recognizing that the people in the startup have very different emotions, and that emotions are important, because I think that for a lot of business people, it's forget about emotions, just read the plan and do the things that are assigned and everything will work out. And so just recognizing there are people who have fear and who are anxious and holding back, and those who are excited is an important first step. I'd say that one of the things, and again, it's a little bit repeating an earlier comment, but as was mentioned, I've been in Silicon Valley for many years, and I've studied and actually worked with some of the most successful tech companies in Silicon Valley. And they have a very different approach to strategy than most companies. And I've come to call it the zoom out, zoom in approach to strategy. And it's interesting because it ties back to the emotions in the sense that the zoom out is 10 to 20 years. And on that horizon, the question is, what is the big opportunity that we should be targeting that will be there 10 to 20 years from now? And then the zoom in, very different horizon, 6 to 12 months. And on that horizon, the question is, what are the 2 or 3 initiatives, no more, 2 or 3 that we could pursue in the next 6 to 12 months that would have the greatest impact in accelerating our movement towards that big opportunity that we've identified? And for many years, I talked about this as just a strategy. But over time, I've come to realize, no, this is a powerful emotional tool. If you have a really inspiring and big opportunity, you can start to build excitement, but then you need those short-term actions and impact to overcome the skepticism and get more people excited, get more people on board to join. And so I think that's, in my view, one of the reasons those companies were so successful was because they had that combination of long-term and short-term, and we're playing to emotions in a very powerful way. I'll also say another, it ties a bit to the culture issue. I have one way of framing the transition in leadership that we're going to have in institutions of all types around the world. Today, the mark of a strong leader is someone who has an answer to all the questions. No matter what the question, you can count on the leader to have an answer. And by the way, if they don't, maybe it's time to get rid of them and get somebody who does. I believe in the rapidly changing world we're moving into, the mark of a strong leader is the one who has the most powerful questions and who will freely admit they don't have an answer and ask for help. Because again, I think from an emotional perspective, it sends a message to the rest of the organization, the rest of the people. It's okay to ask questions, number one, and it's okay to say you don't know and to ask for help. And that helps to overcome fear, because a lot of the fear of people in organizations is they don't feel they can ask for help. It's all on them, and God knows they're not going to be able to do it. And so the fear just intensifies, versus if you have a leader who's asking for help, oh my God, it's okay. This is good. We can come together. Let's figure this out, because that question is really exciting. If we could come up with an answer to that question, man, imagine what we could accomplish. So those are just some things that I think can be very helpful.
And John, Matt is very good at asking questions. He is a powerful leader by doing exactly, but that zoom in, zoom out, which you've written about a lot in the last few years, I reckon everyone write that down, because that's a really brilliant insight. I've got a question that I'm almost like a stalker at each of your events so far on your launches. Is I was so inspired by the power of pull. I want to know where it's gone. How does the power of pull relate to the three pillars? And as everyone who's on here knows, I regard you as one of the most inspirational people with a huge power of pull. In Yiddish, you have Menschlichkeit, the art of being human. So how does the power of pull relate to the three pillars?
Wow. Well, those who know me know that everything I do is connected in one way or another. So my challenge is how do I segment and avoid overwhelming people with just everything's connected. And you're drawing out the connection. I think the power of we're living as a world of push. Just push to get things done. Give orders, give instructions. The key to success in a rapidly changing, uncertain world is pull. How do you pull the people and resources and knowledge to you when you need it? And I talk about 3 different levels of pull in the book, but the level of pull that I'm most excited about and that I feel has the most value is the form of pulling out of each of us more of our potential. That's the ultimate power of pull, is pulling out of each of us more of our potential. And so the connection, with the journey beyond fear is that if we don't move beyond fear, we're never going to achieve more of our potential. We need to pull out of ourselves the emotions that will help us to make that journey. And so I think that's it's just a continuing effort on my part to harness that power of pull.
And that exponential opportunity. Renée, who's joined us, has just published a book again on unlimited potential. And her first pillar, John, is optimism. So I love Renée's book. And Renée wanted to ask you a question on, fear and optimism, and really to share her learnings.
Yeah, thanks, Victor, and thank you everyone who's put this on and contributed today. I was just thinking then, even if I walked away now, I've just got so much out of today. So I love what you were saying before, John, about, an asking versus a telling culture. And something that I sort of bring in there is I think Australia has become a real what economy, especially in the workplace, versus a how economy, which is the whole action piece. And I just wanted to tap in on that and ask you, I have a concept that I've written about and I live day to day, which is the gift mindset, which is about unwrapping the successes and the challenges and embracing those lessons and sort of layering and stacking those to build resilience to get through anything. And in one of the chapters, I talk about fear, the opposite of fear. I know there's fear and love and all that, but fear, I think the opposite of fear is trust. Trusting yourself, trusting your beliefs, letting go of limiting beliefs, trusting others in the situation. And I know that's worked for me and a lot of my clients. And I'd love your thoughts on that.
Wow. No, it's a huge issue. I think that there are all kinds of surveys done around the world about the erosion of trust in all of our institutions. And everybody I know knows the surveys. Nobody's asking why.
Yeah.
What can we do about it, right? It's all, oh yeah, trust is eroding. We heard that. We know that. And to your point, I believe that one of the consequences of fear is loss of trust. We become more and more isolated and less trusting of anyone else. We can't rely on anyone else. There's just too much at stake. And who knows? Seems like a nice person, but they could end up really doing me harm. And so, I think again, it's one of the reasons I'm so focused on this notion of how do we overcome fear and build this sense of excitement, because again, you can and one of the things I love about the passion of the explorer is I can almost guarantee that within about 15 to 20 minutes of a conversation with somebody who's got this kind of passion, they're starting to talk about this really gnarly problem that they have been trying to solve and they have no idea how to solve it. And can you help me? Do you have any ideas? Do you have any thoughts? And that expresses vulnerability.
Yeah.
It starts to build trust, right? Versus the person's afraid, they're just going to sit there and say, no, I'll figure it out. I know everything, I don't need any help. And so again, I think it's such an important element in terms of building trust that you're willing to express that vulnerability. And I think the best way to be willing to express vulnerability is if you're really excited about what you're trying to do and recognize that you're going to need and want help in order to do it. Again, no matter how smart you are, you're going to get to better impact more quickly if you ask for help.
And Renée just does it so brilliantly, activating people. And I think the segues to Jeff, because Jeff exhibits the passion of the explorer. He has taken over the presidency of a soccer club and rejuvenated the youth wing of it through lockdown, which has been extraordinary. And now one of the big banks has asked him to come in to help solve some of their problems. So I think, Jeff, you wanted to raise something on activating the passion of the explorer in organisations.
Yeah, that's and great to have you, John, and rereading The Power of Pull. So particularly in the context of coming into an environment of a transformation within a bank and helping to use the power of pull to drive people forward and change and communications. But and yes, the passion of the explorer behind me here, the top of New Zealand, so a lighthouse, and you can't help but not have an exploration mindset in such a small, faraway place as New Zealand. So so I have that behind me there. But yeah, the question really is. And it's in a personal, but also in an organizational context, is how do you best, some tips, or how do you best activate the passion of the explorer to help people move beyond fear? So obviously in that transformation and change context of people in organizations, I think there's personal transformations people have to make too, but what are some tips you can provide? And I think you've given a few inklings along the way of how to activate, deliberately use that word rather than find, but activate the passion of the explorer.
Yeah, I will say one of my propositions, and I do think that I get pushback on this, is my belief is that we all have the passion of the explorer within us. It's just waiting to be drawn out and cultivated and encouraged. And unfortunately, I think we live in institutions and cultures that crush that passion, that you know, the message we get is forget about your passion, you know, maybe you can do it as a hobby after work, but you know, when you're at work, just get the job done, read the manual and follow the instructions. And I think that part of it is, again, the leadership, the shift in leadership in terms of willingness to ask questions and ask for help, because now that starts to intrigue people, you know, especially if they're, I mean, I'm not just saying ask any question, I'm saying ask question, what could we accomplish if we were able to do this? Or what kind of opportunity could we create if we did this? But something that really inspires people to say, if I could come up with an answer to this, this would be amazing. It's not just a random question that, you know, anybody could ask. This is really exciting. And then I think part of it too is this notion of, I've written a lot about this in other contexts, but I've come to believe everybody talks about the future of work. Nobody, at least, again, generalization, very few people are talking about what could work be, what should work be in the future. And I believe one of the ways of drawing out passion, and I'll just give a quick example, it's an old one, but I think it illustrates Toyota in their assembly line, in their factories. This was a couple decades ago, went into the workers and said, look, you have some routine tasks to do because you're in an assembly line, but your real job is to find problems, see problems that haven't been seen before and solve them. Then don't just file a problem report. And if you can't solve the problem, we'll put a cord next to your station, you pull it, and we'll swarm you with a team of people to help you solve that problem. You'll be a hero for having found that problem. And all of a sudden, passion levels went way up because now they were making a difference. They weren't just doing routine tasks that anybody could do. They were seeing a problem that nobody had ever seen before, and not just seeing it, but solving it. My God, you know? And so I think it's, again, it's those small moves in the local work environment that can help build passion among the people to say, wow, I'm really making a difference here. And so those would be a couple of
thanks, John. And I think I know there's a couple of board directors on this call here as well. I would probably leave that with a thought that you left previously about questions and saying how many board members ask their CEOs or their executive to come to them with questions, not with answers.
And any board members of the bank that has just recruited Jeff, he should be on the executive table, not just brought back as a wise consultant. Look, the hour is coming close. So Sonya and Julie have got really interrelated questions. So I wonder if Sonya and Julie, you can ask your questions in turn. And then John, if you can combine your answer, if that would be all right.
Sure.
Yeah, I think it continues with the theme of how you sort of activate passion. So I find I can activate passion within myself and I can draw in others, but it's helping them to sustain that energy. I've got enough energy for everybody, but I find that sometimes work commitments or, you know, long days for some people, for example, I've got a vet at the moment, so there's a real problem amongst vets of mental health issues. And there's a lot more people owning pets these days, and there's not enough staff, and they're working longer hours, and they're very stressed, and they don't know how to access support. And I said to him, well, this is a problem worth solving. We should think about how we're going to do it. But I find that he's very busy. So, yeah, how do we sort of create a platform in which we can, I know we're not going to solve it overnight, but we just need to work on it over a period of time, and I need to keep him engaged. How do I do that? It's a bit similar to Matt, I think. Yeah.
And Julie?
Yes, thank you, Victor. Thank you, John. Good to be here and see everybody. My question's probably at the other end to Sonya's, because I've been doing a lot of work on climate change and what's going to happen if we actually don't work collaboratively around the world. And what you've said today is, well, it does resonate clearly, because we don't want to look at the fear factor, because then that immobilizes everybody. So how can we as a world tackle climate change and get impact without scaring people to death?
And Julie, just add 20 seconds on the stuff you're doing for the barrier reef. I mean, you've worked out you can't solve climate change, but you can solve runoff of the reef.
Oh, look, I'm on the board of Greening Australia, and they're a for-purpose environmental enterprise. And for a long time, the scientists have been studying the impact of climate change on the reef. And it has, you know, two main issues. One is climate change, but the second one is about the segments of the segmentation that comes off the land and runs down the rivers and then erodes the reef. So Greening Australia, probably about 5 years ago, took on board a project to try and restore the gullies up in the hinterland behind the reef. And we've done what we've now sort of put in place is water quality has improved as a result of these works, which then impacts on the reef and preserves at least part of the degradation, not so much the climate change, but at least the segmentation coming into the ocean. So it just goes to show that scientists, you know, they can study, but we need to take action. And Greening actually is an organisation that takes action. So we've done very well.
So, two different questions, but you know, I'll start with the climate one first. There's a whole chapter in my book on movements and what has led to successful movements throughout history in different parts of the world. And I won't go into detail, but one of the key elements that in my research has led to the most successful movements with impact is what I call an opportunity-based narrative. They resist threat-based narratives. They focus on what is the incredible opportunity that we could achieve if we all came together to do something. And so they're not playing to the fear, they're playing to hope, excitement, love, and all the emotions that really can drive action and commitment. And so I think that certainly my belief is that many of the movements we have today around the world are driven by what I call threat-based narratives. You know, there's terrible things happening in our world. We need to stop it now. That's all it. Just fight the enemy and get it over with. And versus what is the opportunity? What world could we create if we all came together to address some of the issues that we're facing? But it's all about the world that we could create together. So I don't know. To me, it's a balancing act. Obviously, everybody has to recognize the challenges and the obstacles, but it's the focus on the opportunity. And then to Sonya's question about sustaining passion, I mean, again, that's certainly a challenge. I'd say, first of all, a test of does the person really have passion is they don't need to be sustained. They are committed, they're excited, they have focus, they will eliminate the things that are distractions. But I think it's one of the reasons I put so much emphasis on these small impact groups. It's bringing people together who have this passion and where they're reinforcing each other, where they're supporting each other, where they're challenging each other. If you're getting distracted, come back and, you know, we need more impact. And it's a sense that we're all in this together that helps to reinforce that passion and sustain it over time. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely brilliant. And you saw the laughter and the smiles, John. As you know, habit one of the optimist is smiling. Habit two is laughter. Look, the hour is up. So I'm going to ask Rob Masters to thank you and the panelists. And then John's agreed to stay on for a few more minutes when we go to Wild Mike. So I know that Wayne Larkin and Kerry Woodburn and a few other people have got some additional questions. So we'll go to Wild Mike, but I'd like to ask the chairman of the Centre for Optimism, Rob Masters, to thank John and to conclude our formal proceedings.
Thanks, Victor. And firstly, thanks to everyone who's tuned into this Zoom conference. I think it's been both inspirational and most insightful, John. So to all the panelists, thank you very much for your questions. And John in particular, I look forward to further engagement with you in the future, and every success with your book, Journey Beyond Fear. I commend it to everyone. So hopefully the sales will go through the roof, and that's always our optimism anyhow. So thank you very much, John.
Well, watching a video is never quite as good as co-creating and being part of the conversation, but we hope you enjoyed the video and the incredible wisdom shared by John and the other participants. We'd love you to get involved with the Centre for Optimism. You can see the website on the screen, centreforoptimism.com, and you can sign up to be a free subscriber. Better still, we'd love you to be a paid member, and please take advantage of all the materials we've got there to help spread optimism and to be infectiously optimistic. There's the Habits of the Optimist course. It takes an hour. There's our survey on optimism. It's a 4 to 5 minute reflective exercise. And there's lots of material on the benefits of optimism, health, strategy, innovation, resilience, and the like. So we trust you've enjoyed it. We wish you a wonderful day. And that's all from us.